This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 113.
We have learned that, and Ken is absolutely right, there are some things that we started to use just because it was cool. Like, oh my God, I got to.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Matt, the iPad Man Rogers. Matt, how are we doing tonight?
I'm good. I can't tell you the last time I opened up my iPad, so why are you naming me the iPad Man?
Well, we talked a lot about instructional technology tonight. We had an awesome guest, Mark Hess, who has served many roles in education and really had a great perspective on technology. We've talked about instructional technology on our show. I feel like it's been a while, but it was a good conversation for our administrator listeners thinking about big picture rollouts of, even if you're not rolling out new technology, but just the way you're rolling out different devices or programs or strategies to your teachers, but also for our teacher listeners for evaluating the use of technology. Why are you using it and why are you not? I named you the iPad Man because you so boastfully described again for the maybe 10th time on the show how you were one-to-one so early on, and you're a pioneer of instructional technology.
In other words, I just stumbled through tech integration and people thought that they should check with me, and I'd be like, I don't know why you're asking me these questions. No, I think I entered the career like many of us, and I think Mark addresses it. We entered the field with those wide eyes of education as technology really became one with education. So it was kind of like life before the internet, how kids these days will never know life before the internet. I feel like we haven't known teaching without some sort of technology integration. I want to say that I walked into my first position, and the following week I was being asked about how to run a smart board. We had not had any professional development. We hadn't had any understanding of the software. It was just downloaded to our computer, installed in our classrooms, and we would get training eventually. But everyone wanted to use it. Everyone was excited about it. And that was the first week of my teaching career. And so when talking about tech integration, what's so funny, and Ken, you may agree or disagree, I feel like my technology integration is the most pathetic of my career this year. And that is completely on purpose. I do not use it unless I truly feel like it would be beneficial. And I don't know if that's because I'm becoming a curmudgeon in my old age, or if that's actually the purpose that I think it is, which is if it's the best bang for the buck, then I'll use it. If I can't figure out a way to have my kids use it at an independent level that is constructive, it doesn't belong as a emphasis of my classroom. And I think that's
well. Then I would say I completely disagree with you with what you're saying.
Love it.
I think this is your best year of technology integration, purely for what you just said, and we get into that tonight.
Yeah, totally.
We talk about the why. We talk about how you and I chased the shiny object for so many years, and we talk about. I get very passionate about where I see instructional technology being useful and its place in the classroom, and so I would argue, and I'm not going to elaborate on why I think that, but I would argue that what you just said is supportive it's one of your best years of doing so.
Which is funny. Before you kick into it, it's funny because we all thought that. I love the part of the conversation related to tech integrator versus curriculum integrator through technology. I think that debate, it's so silly how so many places, my own district included, set up their use of technology almost in the wrong department, and we're scrambling to play catch up after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've done justice for this introduction. So let's jump right into our conversation with Marquez.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Hi, Mark. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
Great. Thank you. Great to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to jump into this conversation with you. So for our audience, officially introduce yourself. Let us know where you are coming from and give us a snapshot of your career in education.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'm coming to you from Michigan, Walled Lake, Michigan, which is about 40 miles northwest of Detroit, or perhaps following the news this past week at Michigan State University. I'm about an hour east of Michigan State University, where the tragedy happened. So I think what's nice about living in Michigan, I can typically just hold up my hand and tell people that I live right here.
I was really hoping you would do that.
So, there it is. Yeah.
I met a person from Michigan years ago, and he did the same thing, and I was laughing about it. And he said, if you ever meet someone from Michigan, I guarantee you they'll do it. And I was in a graduate class, and there was someone from Michigan. And I said to the person next to me, I said, on lunch break, I'm going to ask them where they're from in Michigan. And I bet you lunch that she shows me on her hand. Yep. And the person's like, no way, no way. So I do it, and the person does not do it. And I gave her a hard time afterwards. I said, honestly, I didn't really care where you were from in the state. I just wanted you to show me on your hand. Well, she was from the Upper Peninsula.
Okay. Well, so what do you,
those Upers, they ruin it for you guys, right?
You need a third hand, I guess, to point to the UP. But,
all right. So great. Please continue.
Yep. So what? There's more to the conversation than Michigan. Right? So 30 years. This is my 30th year in public education. Like many folks, my career, the trajectory has just been from the classroom, which I absolutely loved, and just through a series of events and circumstances, became an assistant principal and then a middle school principal. I spent some time at central office as the curriculum and technology director, but for the past several years, I'm back at the school level. I'm the principal at Guest Elementary. It's a K-5 building, about 350 students. We're a Title I school. And I absolutely love being back in a building. I enjoyed my time at central office, but working at central office is as rewarding as it was. I need to be in the building with teachers and with kids. I need to be in the classrooms working with teachers on, professional learning. And there's nothing better than in the morning greeting the kids as they come through, and the hugs, the high fives, and just watching the kids grow. So 30 years in same school district. Absolutely love public education and love what I do. And I'm just happy to be here to have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say, looking at your experience in central office? So I'm kind of in a similar situation. I taught elementary for a while, and now I'm working as a secondary instructional coach. And a majority of my time is spent in the schools and in the classrooms, but I'm housed in district office, and I'm pulled there a lot. And I'm not at the school when students walk in and that type of stuff for the most part. So, but I think there's a lot that I'm gaining from that experience in central office, even though I share the same thought as this is not my end game. I need to be in a school. What did you learn from central office? What perspectives changed for you coming from being a teacher and a building administrator, and then seeing the other side of the district that changed your perspective on your approach now being back in the building, or just understanding the other side of the game?
I think when I first got to central office, we were in a unique position as a school district. We were merging our technology department with our curriculum department. I had been a middle school principal for, at this point, 9 years. I had a keen interest in instructional technology, had a real passion for taking and designing curriculum, infuse it with educational technology. And so, just through a series of some leadership opportunities that I had, some professional development opportunities, um, you know, I guess our superintendent saw it fit that I might be a good contributor to central office. And so for 9 years, we took the technology department, the curriculum department, and we put them together as one department. So I had everybody in the room all focused on, what, because for many years, like many school districts, you have a tech department, you have a curriculum department, and they often work independently of one another. But really, what we saw in our vision is that the curriculum, the instruction, the teaching and learning should drive the technology, not technology, dictating or driving where the curriculum and the teaching and learning was going. So it was fantastic. We had all of the departments in one room. We would have awesome meetings. We talk about what do we want to accomplish in terms of teaching and learning. What's our instructional goals? And those conversations led us to the technology that we need. Uh, One thing that was happening in Michigan, probably like many school districts, 2009, 2010, that period is the advent of the iPad in schools. And many districts in Michigan, but I'm sure elsewhere, the iPad was that sexy new instructional that technology tool. We got to get the iPads in the hands of the kids. And so, districts all around us were spending millions of dollars of acquiring large deployments of iPads to put in the hands of teachers and students, anticipating that would enhance teaching and learning, that would, cultivate an enriched classroom. The problem is that those decisions look at technology as the forefront rather than what do we want to accomplish from an instructional and curricular standpoint. What's our objective? What do we want the students to learn? What's our learning targets? Once we can identify those, then we can say the technology, what are we going to do in the classroom with the technology to help further our curriculum, our teaching and learning. So those are the conversations that we would have as a department, meeting with teachers and principals and directors about where are we at with our data, where are we at in English language arts or our mathematics, where are we at with our STEM curriculum, where are we at with our fine and performing arts. We really looked at this from the lens of what do we want to accomplish from a student's perspective. What's our end game here? Once we identified those objectives and goals, then we could shift our focus to how can technology support that? How can technology augment that? How can that help teachers become, better at their craft? We always talk about teaching and learning. Teaching, there's the science and the art of teaching. So, the art of teaching is the creativity that we can provide in the classroom, the great minds, the innovation, the science behind the teaching. I mean, there's been so much research out there from folks like Robert Marzano or John Hattie about, hey, this is what works in the classroom. These are the instructional strategies that will yield greatest gains in student achievement. We know that, but how can we take that and cultivate the art of teaching? And we felt that providing teachers and students with technology that aligned with our goals would be the best way to go about that. So that was an exciting time. That was a period where we were just focused on enhancing teaching and learning, making sure what's our primary objective then we could focus on the technology piece. Um, and in Michigan, probably like many school districts in states, is budget cuts became a concern. We started in Michigan declining enrollment. At our peak, we were a school district of about 19,000 students. Now we're down to about 12,000 students. The loss of revenue. So then we started to have to be really creative about how can we sustain what we've already set in place? How can we continue to capture this momentum? And then, being at central office, the work shifted from more about the creativity and professional learning and teaching and learning and technology. The focus shifts to more about policy, budget, um, you know, contract negotiations. Um, once those conversations started shifting for me, is when my passion, when you stop having fun at what you're doing, and for me, my arc at central office was I got to the place where I wasn't having fun. My work, um, in my opinion, just wasn't as impactful as it had been because, um, you know, pretty soon you're in meetings all day and you're talking about procedure and policy and uh, you know legal questions and certainly budget cuts. We weren't immune to budget cuts like most districts. I think in a period of about 8 years, we cut 20 million from the budget, and so that was my tipping point of I need to get back to the building. I need to get back to the classrooms, back to where I found my joy. And my joy in my profession has always been in the classroom, whether it be a classroom teacher, assistant principal, a director. That was my home. That was where I felt my safe spot was professionally, where I felt enriched and motivated, and where I would get the most just joy out of being with teachers and working with them on curriculum development, technology, and then being right there watching the teaching and learning. That's where the magic happens. And so it's just I think all of us started off being teachers, right? We go to school, we go to college, we get our teaching degree. I know when I first started teaching, I was in room 109 teaching fourth grade. I thought I was going to be in 109 teaching fourth grade, for 40 years, right? Um, I did not go to college to become an administrator. I did not go to college to be a central office administrator. I did not go to college to be a director. I didn't even know what those were at the time, right? I went to college to become a teacher. And I think, Ken, probably like you, over a period of time, you're on committees, you're doing leadership work at the building level within your department. Somebody at central office or a building principal recognizes the work that you're doing. Pretty soon, you're leading district committees or district initiatives. You're doing presentations. You're going to local conferences presenting. You're going to state conferences, and it just kind of evolves into, hey, my role here, the space that I'm creating is I'm an educator. And whether it's in the classroom or at central office or as a building principal, I'm just taking my passion, my learning, and trying to enhance those around me. And that's, it's just, at the end of the day, that's just what it's about.
So I guess, I could chunk a few of the things that you said and dive into them. The first one I want to talk, and Ken, feel free to kind of chime in on this one too, is you talked about that rollout of technology, and so many districts, I feel like, did not see the end process like you guys did in your district. I can speak for my district and say that we went 1-to-1 at the high school level around 2006, 2007, rolling out the iPad. I had an iPad in my classroom 3 weeks after Steve Jobs walked across the screen with it.
Yeah.
And
it's going to revolutionize teaching and learning.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
It's going to change the game. Yep.
And it took, pure from that technology side of things. I bought into the hype like a lot of the people in the different school districts. but it didn't have the functionality. It didn't make a difference until 3, 4, 5 years later that I felt like we spent a tremendous amount of time justifying the use of technology as opposed to actually integrating it. And I think, Ken, I don't know if you feel like this. I remember pumping SAMR like crazy, which was the gateway drug to technology integration, how to make everyone feel like competent. Hey, you're taking one step at a time and not looking at it from the lens more of like a TPAC, where you're actually integrating the knowledge of kids and development, the importance of education, and how technology can enhance that. So I guess that round question, and Ken, feel free to chime in on your district and your own kind of development, is how did you see the value in instruction? Because so many of us were glossy eyed at the possibilities, regardless of how shallow they were. Because so many of the activities that I pushed with technology lacked a tremendous amount of education. And it took me a long time to actually feel like I was integrating technology in the way that was actually more helpful than a nuisance.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
No, go ahead, Mark. You can start.
Well, I think, let's take a look at the evolution of technology in the classrooms. I think for most districts, it started off with, the labs, right? In the 90s, we had, labs. They were some empty classroom that was converted into a lab or down in the media center. And we would take the students, we'd walk them down. We often had a sign out or a schedule where each teacher had like 45 minutes, an hour in the lab. And then those labs evolved, and pretty soon we started looking at carts that had laptops on them. And then those laptops kind of emerged into the Chromebooks, and now I look at our schools now, and we used to be, when I first became the tech director, the only device we would allow in our school district was a PC, a Windows based machine, right? Well, first and foremost, all they are screens, right? That's what we do now. We doesn't matter if it's a Chromebook, a PC, a tablet, the list goes on. All we're doing is purchasing screens and engaging in content that we find online, right? And so I think once we could identify that it's not the glossy machine like the iPad or the Chromebook or the PC or whatever. Districts, we have to be device agnostic. And my goodness, a parent can go to Walmart and get a Chromebook now for $150. The need to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on a device is it's just no longer the case. But how do we? I think what a lot of districts where they take a misstep is, before you identify the device that you're purchasing, before you identify, and it could be an iPad, which if done right, can be very, very useful. Whether it's a Chromebook or a PC, before you identify the device, and I've always said that choosing which device is third or fourth on the list. First and foremost, you identify, well, what's the why, right? Why do we want this in the classroom? Why do we want these devices in front of teachers, in front of students? But the second, and I think which is often overlooked, as how are we going to provide professional learning to teachers? Now, I'm not talking about drive-by PD where, hey, stop by central office, pick up your new device, and have a 3-hour training on it. Anytime a district is deploying new technology, whether it's interactive, digital short throw projectors or smart boards, whether it's a new software, a learning platform, whether it's iPads or Chromebooks, that training has to be ongoing. You absolutely have to build in every single year, working with staff and making sure that they understand that this tool is going to enhance what I bring to the table as a teacher. This is going to enhance the teaching and learning. I think so many districts make the mistake is they do an initial training when they roll out, and then it's like, okay, here you go. You've been trained for the last 3 hours. Now go transform your classroom, right? And one of the things that we always do when we in our district is a forefront is we build in the professional learning. If we're going to introduce, I give you a great example. 2016, 2017, we deployed about 900 Epson short throw projectors. We built in when we were negotiating like the teacher contract, the calendar, we built in for 3 straight years time for training on the short throw interactive projectors, right? And it's just like math instruction spirals. I think professional learning should spiral too. What we learned in year one and what we're going to learn in year three as educators is going to be much different, right? We're going to ramp it up. We're going to year one you spend time talking about just the functionality of the device, but by year three you're really talking about true integration into the learning standards, into using it for formative assessment, using it to check for understanding, or providing your groups in terms of what skills the kids have mastered or haven't mastered. That's when it becomes truly integrated into the curriculum, and it just becomes an extension of the teaching. I just think that, in my experience, as many districts, many schools lose sight of the importance of investing in professional learning, uh, after the initial deployment. But yeah, and it's constantly evolving. I think, with technology, you can never predict, what's going to be like in 3 years. And we just have to be able to be flexible and to adapt. And we all know in our schools, we have those teachers who are just going to roll up the sleeves, put in that sweat equity, and they become really good at the technology. We have to harness and tap into those teachers, help them partner with the principals and the directors, the instructional coaches, and really be that true partner. And how can we support each other, grade levels, by departments, by teams, and making sure that, we're just all learning together.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I mean, I completely agree with you in terms of selecting the device. We just had a district visiting us looking at a tool, formative, that we've really rolled out heavily in our secondary schools. And it's a fantastic instructional tool that you can use. And they were evaluating whether or not it would be impactful. And one of the biggest things is it allows students to show your work, and teachers can see in real time a big picture of every student showing their work at the same time, dig into specific students. It's a really great tool to adjust your instruction and manage small group. They didn't have touchscreen devices. And it was a realization of, okay, if we want this tool, part of the rollout needs to be, as we replace Chromebooks, we replace them with touchscreens, right? So again, the tool or the device you're using should be based on the strategies and the actual technology applications that you're using. So I completely agree with you on that. 100% on the professional development. I'm not going to add anything to that other than that was spot on from my perspective. For me, when talking about integrating technology into the classroom, it was something that I kind of rode the wave big time. I was the first of many, many things in my school as well as my district as we incorporated more and more technology. And now that as I evolved in my own classroom and now being removed from the classroom, if it doesn't impact differentiation, I personally think the tool is not worthwhile at all. To me, technology, if I could boil it down to one thing, it is a game changer when it comes to differentiation. And what I mean by that is there are so many fantastic tools out there that allow us to collect simple, quick, and aggregated data on students. Formative being one of those. That's why I'm a huge proponent of that tool. Leveraging Google Forms in a very simple way. There's a lot you can leverage to collect simple data to then justify and determine what your differentiated instruction looks like. Along with that, if you're doing differentiated instruction, you should be working with small groups or even individuals. again, technology is another tool that allows us to facilitate a little bit more engaging, a little bit more guided independent work, because we have applications that go along with programs. I can make a screencast. I again can use tools where I'm collecting more data on students or they're checking their own work. So for me, technology, yes, you can enhance whole group instruction with technology. You can use some simulations, and there's value in that too. And I'm not discounting that. But for me, when it comes to technology, I could throw instructional technology completely out of my classroom except for the differentiation piece. There would be a huge deficit in my ability to provide more frequent differentiated instruction if I lost technology in my classroom. Everything else I could replace. It might not be as great, but I could replace almost everything else. And so, but again, that boils back to what you said, Mark, the why. Why are we utilizing technology in our classroom? And although differentiation, I think, is something every teacher needs to utilize, from my perspective as an instructional coach, when teachers ask me about using certain technology, my first question is, what are you looking to accomplish? Why do you think you want to use this tool? A lot of times they'll come to me and say, I saw someone using this tool, I want to try it. Great. What do you do in your classroom that you think needs enhancement? And sometimes we can find that, all right, yeah, we can enhance this with technology. We can get more information from students. We can make it more efficient. There's a lot that we can accomplish with that, but it's got to start with the why. Just especially now, being through COVID, everybody's been exposed to technology. Teachers have been forced to utilize it. Why? Why are you using it? And there are so many ways that we can enhance instruction. And I think that's what many of us took away from that COVID experience, but unfortunately, I think it's what many of us are ignoring as well. We're just circling back to not using technology because we think kids are on screens too much. Yeah, maybe, but let's make the technology time more effective, right? So yeah, I think there's so many of those components.
I guess
So I want to.
can I
Go ahead,
can I
Matt.
just kind of challenge both
Yep.
that, because that sounds really smart right now, right? Like that's a really smart perspective. And Mark, one of the things that I find interesting by what you said was you seem to be ahead of that. But Ken, I've known you for years. You always kind of hedged in that direction. That technology was an enhancement. It was uh, a a way to reach kids and utilize instructional time and make the most of it a little bit further. But you also fell into the trap of the shiny new item. Mark, there's a story, and I won't go into the full story, but of Ken getting his first 3D printer after, many of us did, and breaking all the rules and being so invested in that. And one of the things I love about Ken is when he dives into something, he is 100% in. But what was that trigger? Because that sounds really smart right now. And I'm not just saying for you, Ken. It sounds smart that if it's not solving multiple features, or if it's not really targeted, differentiated, that is where I think we all logically are concluding now. But what was that shift? What was that transition that you saw? Was it, for me, I started to realize that having a device, an iPad, when I got my second school issued or a personal iPad, it wasn't that big of a deal anymore. Like it's just a school district device that I utilize. That was when I was able to look at it from the idea of it being tool, as opposed to thrusting an idea at kids haphazardly. What was that trigger that kind of shifted it into an actual um, good replacement or justifiable use of instructional time in your classroom? And Mark, if you feel like you have that transition too, maybe this was how you came to that conclusion of being curriculum focused initially.
Can you clarify what you're asking me?
I guess the it really just comes down to, at what point do you feel like you got to the perspective of technology integration that you have now?
I would say that I've come to that perspective the same way I've come to many of the perspectives I have about my own teaching, and it's through reflection. And I think it's something that's difficult to do. It's something that we don't always have time to do or think to do, but it's just reflecting on, okay, what are the gains from this? What are the gains for me? What are the gains for my students? How is this enhancing anything? And circling back to, what are my goals instructionally in my classroom? And like you said, I did fall for the shiny new objects syndrome, especially when you and I were really into robotics and STEM. I was constantly finding any grant I could to get anything in my classroom and seeing how it could work. And I will never forget the goal that I set for myself that I didn't get to pursue for when I was teaching fifth grade. When I moved into teaching STEM as a special that was added to our district, my goal for the next year as a fifth grade teacher was going to be not to do anything new. It was going to be reevaluate things that I've stopped doing because of all this shiny new stuff that was actually really beneficial, but I've let fade away because I got distracted. And so, I think it's just being reflective as a teacher to look back and say, is there a benefit to this? And as teachers, if you have the opportunity to work with any type of coach in your district, use them as a reference point to try new things so that you can have a reflective conversation together. Because I have helped teachers integrate technology into lessons. Part of it was during a time when we had to, but I would ask them, did this make the experience better? There's going to come a time where we don't have to use technology. When we're out of this pandemic, we know we're not going to have to. Was it better? And if it was, okay, let's keep doing it. Is there other opportunities like this? If it wasn't, all right, we'll use it as long as you have to, but then you can go back to the way it was before because there wasn't added value to
it. What year did you? So you're a lot younger than I am. So I've been doing this 30 years.
I haven't.
10. So when did you guys? I'll bring this to a point here, but within the last 10 years.
My first year of teaching was 2012.
This is 2012. Year 15 for me, so I'm halfway. Yeah.
So let's just take a look at the last 25 years. We're teaching in an era that technology is truly been integrated for the very first time in our profession, right? And you were probably students at the time when, whether it be middle school, high school, elementary school, when laptops or devices started to become prominent, where I started teaching in the 90s. My first couple years before we had projectors, we had the old overhead projector, right? So in no time in our history, other than now, the last 25 years, is that it's an exciting time to be in education because all these things are being introduced to us. So you guys are the pioneers, right? That's why you had this thirst to whether it be the 3D printer or whether it was me wanting to make sure I had a interactive touch screen projector because I wanted kids up controlling the content, not the teacher. If we were to come along and let's say we started teaching in the next 10 or 15 years, all of this technology is already in place. So my point is, we have something in common. We had this itch, we had this desire to take, let's call it the shiny new thing, because we saw the potential of how that can enhance our craft in teaching and learning. Now, we have learned that, and Ken is absolutely right, there are some things that we started to use just because it was cool. Like, oh my God, I got to have the clickers. I got to have the, my first set of clickers, for polling kids, right? But if I wasn't using that, and believe me, my first couple of years where I had the clickers, I wasn't using that for formative assessment. I was just using it because it was cool. I would engage the kids. They had a device in their hand. I'm like, wow, here it is. It's 1997 and all my kids have this, device in their hand, and I can ask them a question and I can get a real-time response. It wasn't until I started to see the potential that, well, wait a minute. I have a summative end of unit test coming up in science. Are the kids ready for it? Maybe the ticket out the door is I'm going to ask a couple of questions about that particular unit, and then I'll have some real-time data to let me know, yeah, they have mastered these standards, or this particular standard, 60% of the kids got this particular question wrong. I better reteach that tomorrow, right? That's when it starts to become impactful. But you're right. I think we've all at some point taken technology because it was awesome. It was cool. It was innovative. Nobody else was doing it. But once we realize that, well, wait a minute, it truly can be impactful. And Ken, you're right. If it's not, then why continue using it? Either I think Ken, your point about reflection, that is so spot on. As teacher leaders, we as educators, we need to make sure that we're engaged in genuine reflection about our practice, and it's important. And I think as teacher leaders, we have to know when we have to cut the cord and move on, or we have to circle back, or we have to say to ourselves, I think I can do a better job with X, Y, or Z. What do I need to do? Can I get some more help? Do I need to spend some more time? I need to go talk to somebody who I think is having some success at that. Because one thing's for sure, it's not just the kids that are learning. We're learning with them, right? And we have to be continuous learners. And I just think this is an exciting time, not just now, but the last 10, 15, 20 years. All of these things came on to the arena in classrooms and to schools with the last 20, 25 years. And I think that's why, guys like us, a lot of our colleagues, people that we know, we tend to be those early adopters because there was something about it that we saw the potential, and we wanted to make sure that we were creating that potential, and maybe that's the innovation, the creative part of what we do. But if you really think about it, I think being in public or being in education and being a teacher now it's as challenging as it is, and as sometimes as the public perception. I think it's an important time, but I really do. We are. I tell my staff this all the time. This is the part of it. This is the period of education that the history books will write about. The era where technology was first used by students. That's this era, right? The last 25 years, and I think it's important, and it makes me a guy that's been doing this 30 years want to do it another 30 years, right? Because I want to see how will this evolve. What's next? Not just what's next in terms of whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality, immersive technology. Where can we take this in with just teaching and learning? And that excites me, and what propels me to keep on doing it.
Right. And I think that's why it's so important, like you said, about always coming back to why. Those setting those core values for as more and more and more technology is introduced into our world, and evaluating how does this impact education. It's never going to stop. And I think having those core set of values that we're looking at, what's the purpose, is what we can use to always evaluate technology. So I want to shift a little bit, because you talked about professional development a lot, and I think that commonly falls on the responsibility of coaches and district office personnel, like you were, like the position you had. But you're now back in the building, and it is a responsibility of building administrators as well, leveraging faculty meeting time and the other things that are built into your schedule. So what advice do you have for other building administrators that you think has been beneficial in the way that you facilitate and operate professional learning in your own school?
I think the first bit of advice is I would never pull the staff together for a staff meeting or professional development if it's something that I can communicate through email, right? I do not think it's wise for any leader, any administrator, instructional coach, a principal to have a staff meeting and it just be sit and get. It just be, if I can communicate this in the form of an email, a newsletter, whatever it is. If I'm pulling my staff together, we are up and moving. We're learning from each other. every staff meeting is about professional learning. Now, do we take time and do team development or staff bonding or have fun? Absolutely. That's I think an attribute of any successful team, that building that relationship, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? The relationships that we have with each other. But my staff meetings are all about professional learning, taking a look at data, having enriched conversations. We had a staff meeting recently, and I didn't have any handouts. I didn't have a presentation, no Google slide or PowerPoint, and nothing like that. We were in a big horseshoe, or I guess a big circle, and we just had a conversation. And I wrote these little topics on index cards, just random topics about um, everything from our social emotional learning program, to our lunchroom, how we provide breakfast and our procedures. I had cards about staff morale. I had cards about teacher parent communication. I pick up a card and I said, "This is the topic, and let's talk about this." Where it was reflection. One of the cards was about our communication to parents, classroom communication, and as well as school communication. How are we doing with that? Are we communicating effectively? Are we sharing information with parents? In our school, we want to make sure that every teacher, including myself, we're sending out a communication a week, just a weekly update. Are we doing that? Is it meaningful? What's the feedback that we're getting from parents? Can we create some efficiencies? Can grade levels work together instead of having 3 fifth grade teachers send out 3 different communications? Do we just have one fifth grade communication? And that was just a refreshing staff meeting. And all it was just conversation. We always talk about, we never have time just to sit and talk about our craft, right? Every time we get together, we're introducing something, we're getting trained on something, whether it's mandated federal, state training, district training. But to take an hour and just sit, it was like living room fort style in our media center. Some people were on the floor, some people were in stools, some people were in chairs, and we just had to talk. For an hour straight, we just talked about things that mattered to us in our school. And the feedback from the staff was absolutely phenomenal. Here, I thought they would take it as, Mark forgot to plan a presentation, so we're just going to kind of mail it in and have a talk. But it was meant to be just having that conversation. I hear that all the time from teachers. We never have time to just sit and talk. That feedback that I got from staff was something. It told me that I need to do that more often. But that my advice about professional learning, about being a principal, is just make it meaningful. And I have a committee. We have what's called like a site council. It's kind of like my leadership committee at the school, and I always ask them, where are we at? What do I consider myself a servant leader. I want to make sure that I'm providing to the staff what they need, what they want. I'm not going to engage in a staff meeting without having input from the teachers about, what's on your mind. What do we need to talk about? What's bothering you? What worries you? What can I do to help you? Let me turn off my light. It's blinking. But I just think that professional learning is something that we cannot. There we go. Sorry, we cannot underestimate the impact, and it has to be meaningful. It has to be genuine. I don't think teachers want to sit in a classroom and have the principal up going over a PowerPoint or slides, for an hour straight. And the other piece of advice that I would give curriculum directors, principles is that if you're going to use data, and everyone loves, you got the charts, student achievement data, attendance data, discipline data, don't show data without at least having a conversation. Looking at data is like layers of an onion. It just continues. One set of data just leads to more questions, right? Um, Peeling back the layers of an onion. Make sure that you provide time to have those conversations. Just don't show the data and say, "Hey, these are our scores. This is where we want to be. Here's where we're at now. Um, let's look at our school improvement plan." And I think that becomes cliche. If we're going to look at data, let's just have meaningful conversations about it, and let's simplify it. Let's not throw charts and tables and graphs. Focus on the most important parts of data. For me, when I look at student achievement data, I want to look at cohort growth. I'm not interested in Michigan, we have something called the M step. So it's just our state assessment. And everyone looks at how do we do in 2020? How do we do in 2021? What I'm interested in is how did our third graders do going from third grade to fourth grade to fifth grade? That same cohort, are they growing? Do they have at least a year's worth of growth for a year's worth of instruction? I think that's important. And for principals, just make sure that if you're using data, allow that time for conversation, and try to simplify it. Don't have too much data. I think teachers get data fatigue, and I think it's valid. I think it's justified to have that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Matt, what's your perspective on professional development? I know you facilitate it as well, but let's take a positive lens. What, in your experience as a classroom teacher, do you feel? What was the professional development you walk out of and you say that was so worth it? That was so worth my time. That was so worth the time moving forward that I know is going to impact students. What does it look like?
Yeah, Mark, you mentioned about how training often is MPD time is meant to be purposeful, but a lot of times we get these trainings 3 weeks after we already found the solutions on our own. To bring in this the manufacturer of our program, or we're giving an assessment, there is probably someone that has dove into it enough to figure out kind of clearly where we're heading. That's so often those style trainings that we get so frequently. And there's some mandates that you have to go over certain topics. We all get it. It's not the best topics, whether it's school safety or, going over those data. We're all adults. We understand that you have to have that as part of the experience. I think the best PD is when you start within the first, I'd say, quarter, validating teachers that what they're doing is already a great start to where you want to go. So whatever that looks like, that the efforts that you're putting in as a teacher may not be perfect, that's fine, but the steps that you're taking are in the right direction. It's what you could ask for. I think reminding, I hate to say this because we've said it a few times, but we're starting to see that why question pop up a ton everywhere, not just education, but let's define the why behind this activity, and what's the why for you. And I think that I don't want to devalue or take away from the purpose of that statement, because I feel like if you go to a conference, you're going to hear that 7-8 times. You go to district level, you're going to hear that type thing. So I think that validation of the efforts that you're putting out there, the reminder that if you care about kids and you're making, if you're advocating for a kid, even if it's not the best direction, but you felt like you were making the best decision for that kid at that time, that is in the right direction. And we can work with you to get it adjusted in the right direction of how, we prefer it to be. And I think when you can validate, and please chime in, when you can validate, that then gives the permission to everyone else to have a voice. So if they pick up a handful of things, or a totally different perspective, they are bought into that conversation for the rest of that PD.
Well, you bring up an interesting point and something that I often think about. I know what my teachers went through during COVID, and it was hell, right? We had to pivot on a Friday, and then 3 days later we're online. It was, and for 2 years it was crazy. Um, I, mentioned validating. I often think do I affirm my teachers enough? I think teachers need affirmation. They need affirmation that yes, what they're doing is making a difference. Not everything has to be perfect every day, but I know as when I reflect as a principal, I don't think I affirm or validate my teachers enough. I don't think I need to spend more time going to my teachers and say, listen, you've got 28 kids. It, you're working your tail off. I see you coming in early. I see you staying late. You're trying to meet the needs of all the students. Not only that, but you're volunteering for this committee or doing this committee. I need to affirm because, teachers by the very nature, they want to do well, right? You know, when you walk into a classroom, most teachers that I know, if not all, are very proud of what they're doing. And as administrators, I just think we need to spend more time. Matt, you talked about validating. I'll use the word affirmation or affirm. I think we need to do that more. And I know I'm guilty, and it's something that I think about that I need to spend more time just talking to teachers, not so much about curriculum or technology or about a particular student, but just speaking to them about you're doing well. I'm proud of you. You're working hard. I see that. I recognize that. Um, and I think now more than ever in our profession, teachers, they get beat up quite a bit. And I just think as leaders, it's incumbent upon us to make sure we take that time and to provide some of that positive feedback to them.
But I want to kind of share, Mark, like you provide validation and affirmation as you're kind of reframing it by an activity like you shared in your example, by giving, here are the topics I'd love to hear feedback about, but I want to hear your teacher voice because I can't be in 17 classrooms at once. And I don't have I'm not justifying the curriculum to parents and students and navigating engagement and technology and standards just continue to press. I think that if I think the scariest thing in leadership is when words become too hollow. And so not to say that that's what you're kind of leading to, but Ken, like I know that your big key is really let the experience drive the motivation. And I think that's where, as a leader, I guess where I would suggest, as from the classroom perspective, continue to showcase why you have the right to earn my respect. And I know that sounds silly, but you are in a leadership role, Ken and Mark, for a purpose. You are built for that situation. And that's either showing great, examples of what that can look like, or, allowing me to see the best side of myself, bringing that in that leadership. And I think that is where when I walk out of a PD session, someone who says that, I can teach something to my style and it be exactly in the right track of where we want it to be, that is the most valuable PD, because I could learn a program head to toe in a PD session. If I can go into a session at a conference, learn about something totally brand new, think that it's the bee's knees, go back to my classroom, run it once, it flop or go incredible, and it's just a tool in the toolkit. But if I leave a professional development where I feel empowered because of an experience that I want to create time in and time out, that is a totally different and kind of outcome. And I think, Ken, might be chomping at the bit to kind of talk about it. Those are the things that make your kids come back, make your teachers come back, make your community buy in. That in that, nice bow at the end is a beautiful package of great education that we're all striving to get to.
And I think one of the key pieces is what you hit on, Mark, is just about making those professional development opportunities meaningful. And teachers don't want to feel like their time is being wasted, right? You said about, can it be covered through an email or a newsletter? And even with that, how often are you emailing your staff? I've worked for multiple leaders, and I've had some that I thought were fantastic with communication because it was very consolidated. Emails came out if it was a absolute I must know right now. Otherwise, it was a weekly newsletter. Read it as you come. Really thinking about that communication to not waste our time or to inundate us with too much, and making those professional learning opportunities meaningful, but also being explicit, like you said, about recognizing teachers and acknowledging teachers, and reminding them what that feels like to bring it back to their students. What I always strive to do, and sometimes it flops. I run professional development constantly in my position right now. And I always try for this. And sometimes, like I said, it's not the best, but I always model what the concept is. I always try to find a way to model the ideas that we're talking about and not just talk about the ideas. And then reflect on and have teachers reflect on that experience. And sometimes it's a big whiff, and that's okay. But at least they see the purpose behind it, and then they can evaluate how that applies to their own classroom.
But
I do want to.
Sorry to say,
please.
When it's a big whiff, isn't that the most validating thing for a teacher too? Right? Like the normalization. I think we working through best practice is all we're looking for. You do not need to show me the shiny new way to, get my kids to line up in line. That's not what I need out of professional development from my leaders, is a strive to try things that may or may not connect, and the permission to, take risks. And
Yes.
You guys model that.
Right. I was just going to say it's okay. We don't have to hit home runs all the time. I encourage my teachers to take risks, and not every shot is going to go in, right? Not every shot's going to be a goal, right? And it's okay. It's how we reflect and how we respond and move forward. I think that's where some of the best learning happens, through failure.
Absolutely. So I want to be cognizant of our time, and I want to jump into our exit ticket, which are the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. Question number 1, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
Relationship. Build that relationship, just a genuine positive relationship. I think, that's what the kids won't remember when they learned how to reduce fractions, but they're going to remember how that teacher made them feel.
So one of the things we love to hear is the best piece of advice that you've ever received. And it could have been from a colleague, maybe a supervisor, or even a student.
I think the best piece of advice is one of my mentors. It just said, take your work seriously, but don't take yourself too serious. And, I take the craft, the career of being an educator very serious, but I think myself, I love my job, but I need to make sure that you have fun, find humor in what you do, and I respect the job, but I don't take myself too serious, but I take what I do very seriously.
I love that. Right now is a great time to ask this question. So, we know the school year goes in waves. Not all of us are on vacation like you are right now, but there are days, possibly weeks, that we struggle to survive. What do you feel like is something every educator needs to hear to power up through those moments of struggle?
I think reflection. reflect. It's okay to spend 10, 15 minutes every day just reflecting. Go back to the purpose of why you became a teacher to begin with. Listen, we've all had those days driving home from work, we put our head down at the pillow at night and we can't turn our mind off because we're worried about X, Y, or Z. I just take some time to reflect about somewhere along the line when you were 18, 19, 20 years old in college, you made a decision to go into teaching, and remember what prompted you to do that. And more than likely, it was about wanting to make a difference, wanting to see the kids grow, wanting to just, most of us that became teachers were teachers because we had a positive teachers in our own lives that influenced us, and we wanted to be a person of influence back on young people. Uh, at the end of the day, no matter how crazy it gets or how messy it gets, uh, remind yourself that at the heart of what we do, it's to be an impactful person for young people.
Awesome. I love that. So it's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. We kind of talked about this topic all night, but what do you really think separates teachers who are the ones constantly seeking to change, innovate, and adopt new teaching strategies?
So I think it's teachers that I see a lot of teachers get to kind of a plateau and they kind of stall, right? It's they're burning out. They lose that energy, that passion. And I think that we just have to remind ourselves that we're never as good as we're going to get. And I remind myself that every morning on my way to work. I'm never as good as I'm going to get. And it's a continuous improvement. We have to continue to work on ourselves as people, continue to work on ourselves as principals, as educators, as teachers. And that's what excites me because I want to know what the mark of tomorrow is going to bring, the mark of next week. I know where I'm at today, and I know I can get better. And that's what continues to drive me.
I love that. So I know I can speak for Ken and say that we've enjoyed this conversation, but it seems like after 30 years, you still have plenty of love for education. How can we continue to learn with and from you going forward?
Well, don't get me wrong. There are days where I thinking, okay, I could retire, or I think about, but I just, you know, I just love what I do. And um, I just think that our job as educators, it's aside from the curriculum, the tests, the teaching and the learning and the units of study and the professional development, aside from all that, we're there for the kids. And, nothing brings me greater joy. I have kids, adults that I had my first couple years of teaching back in 94, 95, 96. That, I'm in contact with, and they're having kids and I'm watching their families grow, and we, exchange cards and birthdays, and we're friends on Facebook, and, just cultivating those lifelong relationships. And I think that's what I would just share with whether anybody that's starting off as a first year teacher or whether in their 30 years is it's how we make people feel. And I know it sounds cliche, but when it's all said and done, it's relationships and each other. And I think that's what is my driver. That's what motivates me.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you so much. This conversation has been a blast, and your district is clearly very lucky to have you serve in so many different roles, and just being there to support good teaching, support your teachers, as supporting as much as supporting the students as well. So thank you very much for your time. I think it's been really beneficial on many instructional sides, as well as for any of our listeners that are thinking about leaps to administration, and what those different capacities could look like, and how it can tap into the skills they have and the passions they have. So thank you once again for your time. And Matt, why don't you take us on out of here?
All right, as we power down this episode, Mark, without a doubt, you leave us feeling powered up. Everyone stay well, keep on pushing, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.